Hello, everyone, and welcome to the LRW 2020 Virtual Conference Inner Leadership Panel. I'm Patricia Baswell, Events Chair at LRW and User Experience Manager at Vitronics. So before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items. Please note that we can't see or hear you, unfortunately, so please use the questions pane in your control panel for GoToWebinar. And also feel free to use the audio pane to get the phone dial-in details if you prefer. There are also some code of conduct items I'd like to just kind of cover. We expect that all participants to be considerate and respectful of all other participants of our meetings and our sessions. So please do behave in a way that creates a safe and welcoming environment. And also please note that we are recording the session, so it will be made available to all participants after the conference. So without further ado, I would now like to hand it over to our host, Sue Marines, Vice President of Global Talent at GATX. We'll introduce our panelists.
Hi, thank you, Patricia. Thanks so much for that welcome. And again, I'd like to extend my warm welcome to everybody who's joining our session today. So I'm excited to introduce the panelists to you, the folks that will be talking about our topic on inner leadership. So first, we have, the next slide, please. We have Jennifer McManus, who is the Senior Vice President, Controller, and Chief Accounting Officer at GATX. Welcome, Jen. Glad to have you. And next slide, please. We have Kim Sass. Kim comes to us from Vitronics, and she is the Vice President of Human Resources. Hello and welcome, Kim.
Thank you.
And next, we have Regina Behringer, who is with Cummins and who is the General Manager of Global Rail and Defense. Hello and welcome, Regina.
Thanks, Sue. Hi, everybody.
So today's topic is, we can go to the next slide, please. Today's topic is inner leadership. And so we have I think, a really good discussion planned for today. And so as the moderator or host here, I just want to kind of cue up the topic a little bit and level set, so we start with some level of understanding about inner leadership. And then we'll definitely add to that and get some more insight from our panelists, which I think will really be helpful. But so inner leadership falls underneath the broader umbrella of leadership. And when we think about leadership, a lot of times we're thinking about focus areas that are really external to us, right? We're thinking about, things like how to influence others, how to delegate, how to lead change, present to senior management teams and things like that. So if you think about all those leadership qualities and exercises, development areas we focus on, those are all outward, right? Some people refer to as the how-tos for leadership. What we're going to do today is we're going to take that focus and shift it and really turn it around and make it an inward focus. Because, we're always striving to shape and influence those external things. But today, with inner leadership, we're definitely taking it internal. So let me give you a basic statement about what inner leadership means. It's really built on a very simple kind of foundational concept. And the idea is that true leadership happens when you first lead yourself through discipline and focus. Okay, so many people would say that leading first through yourself through discipline and focus is very important. And inner leadership, some would say, also is even more important than some of those how-tos in terms of really making you successful as a leader. So when we talk about inner leadership, we're thinking about as an inner leader, you're having a really good understanding of who you are, where you want to go from a career perspective, what you're striving for, what you can accomplish, and then self-managing in such a way to bring success. And when you're bringing success, you're not only bringing success for yourself, but then also for your team members that you might lead, and then for the organizations that you work for as well. As our panelists talk today, you'll hear a lot about self-discovery and self-awareness, because with inner leadership, it starts with that foundational piece as well. We do have some resources we're going to share on the back end. We have a slide with resources, and because we want you to have some practical applications and ways you can take this concept and really make it work for you. And one of those articles that we actually kind of point you to talks about 4 pillars of self-leadership. And those are self-discovery, acceptance, and then self-management or that self-discipline, and then also self-growth. So those are 4 areas that you'll hear really woven into our conversation today. So one of the things I want to focus on and talk about before we get started here too is the idea that you can lead from anywhere in the organization. You don't need that title, right? You can lead whether you're an individual contributor, a manager, leading teams or anything like that. So one thing that would be really helpful for us, if we were all in a room together, I would do a show of hands, who manages people and who's an individual contributor, but we're in this different format. So I'm going to pop up a quick poll here that just asks you as the audience to let us know, are you a people manager or are you an individual contributor? And if you could just respond to that poll real quick, that'll be helpful to us. Okay, we'll give you a few more seconds, but this should be a pretty quick one. Are you a people manager or an individual contributor? Okay, and let's share those results. Let's see what we got back on the poll there, if we can take a look at those. Okay, so it's pretty close to a 50-50 split. Interesting. Okay, so 55% individual contributor and then 45% people manager. Okay, all right. In my experience with individual contributors is, a lot of times you might be in a small flat organization, you might lead a function, but you don't have direct reports, so maybe you put individual contributor. But I'm also guessing that folks that are in the individual contributor category, some of those folks are going to have aspirations to lead at some point. So we have content to kind of address all these areas. So that's good for us to know, though. Thank you for sharing and for participating in that poll. So now I'm going to go ahead and just get us started on our questions for our panelists. And the first one I'm going to send, put out to the group here is, what does inner leadership mean to you, and why do you feel it's important? Okay, and Jennifer, I'm going to ask you to get us started on that one.
Thanks, Sue. And, thanks for everybody that is attending. I wish I could actually see you. This is definitely a different format, but I'm so glad that we're able to do this still. So when I think about inner leadership, there's a lot there, right? And the idea of leading yourself, and that's really important, because if you know how to lead yourself well, most likely it will lead to being a more effective leader of others as well. And what it means to me is, I think a lot about practicing, I would say strong self-awareness, high integrity, and dedication. But I also think this is really housed in a mindset, really. And it's this idea of an open and resilient mindset, and really taking every opportunity as a learning opportunity. And that can be hard sometimes, but I think it's really looking at anything from an interaction to a meeting to maybe a project you ran, or even up to a position that you're currently in, and looking at when things maybe didn't go the way you expected it to go. It's sort of looking inward and challenging yourself to understand and say, why didn't it go that way, right? And what can I do to make it different the next time I have it? And sometimes it can be simple, right? It can be an interaction where you say, okay, that didn't work. Let me look inward. Let's figure out what's going on here. Let me try this differently because I want to move forward, right? So it's constantly about moving forward towards those goals. I think it can be as simple as that. And I think sometimes it can be a situation where you realize, you know what, I need to change my situation. But it's about, again, looking inward and challenging and always figuring out, how to move forward. And I think it's something that you're going to practice throughout your career. So, you sort of build on all those different experiences, and it's that continuous learning and challenging yourself that really helps to build strong inner leadership. And then again, going back to why is that so important, as a leader? Well, I mean, I think it's when you build upon that and you're practicing that, you're also being fairly transparent to others about what's important to you, and that you're open and you're flexible and you're trying to move forward. And I think that transparency really builds trust with others, and that ultimately helps you be a more effective leader.
Okay, thanks, Jen. And then Regina, let me give you a chance to add on to that as well.
Thanks, Sue, and thanks, Jen. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here as well, and lots of great comments. I would also add that, I mean, definitely starts with you, knowing yourself, what motivates you, your personal visions for what you want to accomplish in terms of your personal goals, your developmental, professional goals, and just really those things that get you excited and energized about work. I think there are definitely opportunities to explore your strengths and in your areas of development. And thinking through the mindset, definitely a positive approach and looking at what you can do and bring to that organization. In terms of the poll at the beginning, I was thinking through, the roles that I've had, and I've had different roles where I've been a manager, I've been an individual contributor. And I think that, especially individual contributor roles, I mean, it might seem like, gosh, who am I leading? But thinking through all the projects and opportunities, there's a lot of opportunity there to lead by influence. So whether you know it or not, people are looking to you in terms of like virtual teams, dotted line reporting, and just opportunities for you to really, shine in those individual contributor roles. So I think they're even more challenging because you're not actually having a direct reporting responsibility, but it's an opportunity for you to really use your inner leadership and shine in those roles. So in terms of why it's important, I think it really helps you with clarity on where you want to go, your direction, your focus, helps with motivation and goal setting and just working toward them. So I think inner leadership, it's a personal vision and what you want to do, want to bring to the table. So just really important and a great opportunity. So thanks, Sue.
Okay, thanks. And then Kim, let's hear your thoughts on this topic as well.
Wow, so many great insights and such. What are we, 2 minutes into our session here? But thanks, Sue. And again, I also appreciate being here. But to add on to that, I look at inner leadership as really that kind of authentic self-awareness. It's, that lifelong learning of who we are. And understanding in one area to focus on that I focus on a lot is really understanding my values and how I choose to live those values. Many years ago, I took this class. I signed up for it. I was super excited about it. It was called Influencing Others. I thought, great, I'm going to go to this class excited to learn about how I get other people to do what I want them to do. Is literally what I thought I was going to talk about for 3 days. And I ended up spending 3 days learning about myself and the way I show up and how that influences others. And it was, I mean, this is many years ago, but it was just, I was shocked, but also amazed by how true that was and how much I've continued to use those skills even from then and continue to learn. I really think with a solid understanding of grounding, I should say, in who we are, which is, we're learning every day, we're also able to navigate stress and how we respond in a stressful situation, really from a place of choice versus impulse, which usually has a better outcome. So that's one area where I think it really can be a value to flex those inner leadership muscles and continue to learn.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, thank you, panelists. I appreciate that. And we move on to our next question. I think of Regina, you made some really nice comments about individual contributors and how people look to them in the organization to lead and that. So I would like to be curious to know what guidance you have for somebody who aspires to lead.
Yeah. Thanks, Kim. I really, thanks, Sue. I love Kim's comments about really getting to know yourself better, because I do think that it really starts with knowing and understanding who you are and how you show up, what your mindset is. I do think you need to learn to just be comfortable with yourself. There will be times when things don't go right. There will be times when you try something and you fail. And I think that leadership from within is that strength to overcome and learn from what's went right, what's went wrong, and how do I take what I've learned and put it into my next opportunity. So really building upon kind of those foundational strengths that you have, and then taking what happens to you in your role, in your life, and then really adding and just growing from that. I do think that it's really important to know your business. So know your team, know your people, know your product, be that expert and the person that people lean on to really understand and know kind of what's going on, so that you are an expert in what you do. In terms of like the team and thinking about how people view you and how you show up, I think that's a couple of folks have said how you show up. Really just think through what outwardly are you expressing, and is your attitude positive? Are you taking that can-do approach? Because people will look to you to inspire leadership. You may not know it, but there will be people within your organization in adjacent industries that are constantly just listening and learning, and you have that ability to influence daily. So taking those opportunities and really thinking about how you show up and looking for those opportunities to inspire confidence makes a huge difference. And then in terms of just being easy on yourself, I think knowing that it's a journey, it's a process, not everything will happen all at once. And as you start to really explore your inner leadership, you will find that there are some things that are going well and maybe move really fast, but other things may be slower and it may take more time. So just remember, it's kind of that development-oriented mindset, and one step at a time.
Okay, and then Kim, I'd like to hear your ideas on how, guidance for folks that want to aspire to lead.
Great. Well, my short advice is start today. There's no reason to wait. The opportunity to lead starts with, as we said, with our mindset, and opposed to a title. So, don't wait for what your organization or you have defined as a leadership position to be posted. Being in human resources, I can't tell you how many times I've had a conversation with someone that maybe saw a position filled by someone else, or saw someone else getting an opportunity to do something, and they said, "Why wasn't I asked?" And my response back is, "Why didn't you say something? What kept you from saying something?" "Well, I didn't see it posted." And that's when I have the opportunity to say, don't wait for it to be posted. We have, if we sharpen our awareness skills, I believe that leadership opportunities show up everywhere, every single day, both professionally and personally. Maybe, you could step up to lead a, corporate or a team charitable activity. That would be an obvious, leadership opportunity that isn't necessarily on the corporate org chart. And I think, you probably even are doing more leadership than you even imagine you are. It could be a group of friends or a family, family members. There's a conflict, and you might step up and help them work through that conflict. And that is leadership. And it's also just not leading people, as I believe one of us noted, leading a process. Even just taking the lead on accomplishing an outcome that you committed to. It really requires personal leadership and commitment to get those things done. And so it's really kind of, again, opening up that awareness and seeing that the opportunity is there regardless of the corporate org chart, regardless of someone giving you the opportunity.
And what I'm hearing is such a strong theme of self-awareness. That's really kind of that starting point. It really is. So let me take that self-awareness concept and ask you all, what steps have you taken to build your own self-awareness and then be able to use that as a basis for your growth as a leader? Because, right, it's something that you would have incorporated into your approach as well. So, and Jen, can I ask you to comment on that for us?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot there in terms of how you can build your self-awareness. And I think it's something that you can practice every day. It really is. It's sort of you're chipping away at something, and I think, one of the things when I think about what I've done is, as I think we've all talked about, that self-reflection, right? In your own career, anytime with experiences, it's always sort of looking inward to understand what could you do differently, what happened that time, what can we think about doing differently next time so that maybe you'll get a different outcome. But I think there's more to it too, which is another one with building your self-awareness is asking for feedback. And I think this is really key I think people do not do it enough. They wait for their annual review, or I know a lot of companies are sort of shifting to more times a year, but a lot of times people still wait. And I think that there's two things to it though. It's asking for feedback, but also being open to hearing the feedback, right? Which is a little bit different because, it's being open to it, which goes back to sort of that mindset, right, of being open and resilient and doing something with that feedback. And I think that, when you're practicing strong inner leadership and building strong self-awareness, there is that sometimes you're going to hear something that you might not like, right? But again, take that back, reflect on it, do something about it. Because clearly, if someone is providing you this feedback that maybe you don't necessarily agree with, you need to think about it from their perspective because you did something that made them view you in a particular way. So take it and think through it. And I think, sort of going to the next piece of where I think building self awareness is really important is practicing empathy. So this to me is really key, and I think it has a really strong connection to self-awareness and strong inner leadership. But it's about really taking the time to understand something from somebody else's perspective. If you take that time, you start to think about how maybe something you do or the way that you interact with them will impact them. And that's how you sort of build that self-awareness. And so maybe, you get some feedback and maybe you weren't thinking about it from a different angle. And then you try it, right? You think about in your next interaction, okay, if I do it this way, what will they be thinking, right? And that it's that constant, again, reflection in getting feedback, practicing empathy, and really it's being open, acting upon that feedback, being resilient, being okay with sometimes getting a message you may not like, but then figuring out a different way to do it so that you can continue to move forward. So those are my thoughts.
No, those are great thoughts, Jen. And I think it takes a certain amount of bravery to ask for feedback too, right? I mean, you're kind of putting yourself out there a little bit. And I think sometimes people say, my company doesn't have that type of culture or whatever, but it's like you can always ask for feedback and people are going to respect that. And you're only, I think, going to grow from it. I really do.
Well, and so I think that's a really good point because I think a lot of times, and I didn't actually say this initially, but when you ask for feedback, it doesn't just have to be to your boss. It can be to your peers. It can be to other people. Like if it was a meeting that you didn't think went well, ask people what they thought. It can be, there's a number of different people that you can get feedback from. And I think that's up and down the chain because you just don't really, unless you ask, you don't know. And it's true, sometimes that can be scary, but it's better. I think it's better to know because otherwise you may really face challenges moving forward.
Yeah, I completely agree. Okay, all right. And then let's see, Regina, we'd like to, hear your thoughts on this topic as well.
Sure, thanks. I love the feedback, right? So the whole idea of asking for feedback and giving feedback, I think it is something that I learned kind of early on in my career. I was really, I've been with my company for 20 years now. And I was really kind of nervous about how do you give feedback, to up and down the chain. And I remember being in a specific project role, and I had some negative constructive feedback, and it was for someone who was my manager and above kind of level. And I was nervous to give it, but I thought, this is the right thing to do because they need to know. And I remember sitting down and not being super comfortable, but I had thought about what I wanted to share and why I wanted to share it. And it was because, I was thinking through, I'm coming from a place of caring. I really thought this person was a great manager, but there were some things that, some behaviors that I just felt like, gosh, you really should know like how this comes across to the team. And it was more about mindset and attitude. And I remember when we sat down, I shared the feedback and immediately it was, thank you. Right. Thank you for letting me know because now I have an opportunity to address it. And what we think about is how big of a gift it is. So something else I learned throughout my career is that feedback is a gift. It's not one of these things that always feels good to give or always feels good to receive. but it certainly is a gift, and how you use it makes a huge difference. I think when you get the feedback, you can really think through, how do I implement that? How do I use it? How do I grow from that? And then also, sharing with others feedback. I mean, it's so helpful. And not to go so deep on feedback, but I think that if you think through what it means to invest the time to do that for someone, it's a really big deal, because they could let it go, and maybe that's easier because it's definitely hard to do. But if you think about the time that it takes to think through, and actually the emotions associated with especially negative constructive feedback, it's a really big deal that someone invested that time to talk to you. So thinking through how you receive it, how you give it, it's really super important. And I think it is an area where all of us can benefit in terms of being able to embrace that. So I think it's something that we can all benefit from in terms of the feedback area with self-awareness. And there are lots of tools that you can use to learn about yourself and create further self-awareness, and work with your team on those. I think that something that I've done that's been really helpful is just using different tools like MBTI, TKI, other tools to really learn about some of the things like internally how we work, and then explore the relationships as well as a team. So it's helped me better understand myself and how I show up with the team. So just a lot of great opportunities there in terms of other tools that you can use. So.
Great, thank you, Regina, for those great ideas. Love that. So, as we think about inner leadership, and again, we're talking about bringing that focus inward, but yet that focus inward does help us achieve our professional goals. So, I'd be interested to hear how you feel like inner leadership has helped you achieve your professional goals. Kim, do you want to comment on that one?
Sure. So first of all, just to close out on feedback, I know you're going to get an opportunity to share your feedback on this session, and I think I can speak for all of us on this panel that well, thank you in advance for taking the time to share your honest feedback with us. But one thing that comes to mind for me on this question is really on my continuous inner leadership journey is learning how to release self-judgment. I know I heard that mentioned already. And it really, self-judgment is such a big negative energy drain and can really hold us back. I mean, I can't imagine there's one of us that's on this session that can't relate to a time when you had a conversation or you presented to something like this, and then you finished and said, oh gosh, I should have said that. I wish I would have said that. I wonder, if I would have prepared more. I mean, all the things that go through, and it's just draining. And if you think about it, none of it really brings you forward when we're doing all of that kind of that judging. So learning how to let that go, and there's a lot of strategies and tactics to do that, has allowed me more space to put energy into learning from my experiences. And then again, that forward thinking. And so, practicing and projecting humility is really allowed me to build my self-confidence and in my ability to move past that fear of failing. And those two things just naturally manifest more opportunities. So be careful what you wish for, I guess.
All right, Kim, no, I love those tips. Those are very good. So yeah, awesome. And then Jen, do you want to comment on this as well?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, again, I think going back to the mindset really of just how you approach your career and your goals, I would say, when I think about when I first came out of college, I think I had this one way I thought my career was supposed to go. It's supposed to be like exactly in this particular order. And I think, obviously as time has gone on, I've definitely realized that that's not how it should be. And I've actually had much better opportunities and experiences because it didn't go the way I had thought it was going to, because I allowed myself to be open to opportunities, be flexible with, okay, you know what, this may not be actually what I thought it was, and I'm going to, switch. And so again, it goes back to this really being open, and all of it is looking inward, figuring out what works for you, what drives you, what motivates you, right? And what you want to ultimately do. But I think in the end, it comes down to being flexible, being open, so that you're able to pursue your goals. Because I think what tends to happen is if you are too rigid in the way you're thinking certain things should go, you're going to miss out on opportunities. Which would, and I will say, like, when I think about my career, there are definitely things that sitting in the position I am today, I'm actually pulling back experiences from years ago where I remember years ago thinking, I have no idea why I'm doing this role. Like, this makes no sense. I don't think it, it's not exactly what I want to do. But I wasn't, I think, practicing as strong inner leadership back then in terms of really understanding that every experience you're going to learn from, and you never know what down the road you're going to pull from. So I think that I think is what has really helped me along the way, is really being open-minded and flexible as you kind of try to move towards your goals.
And Jen, I like that thought, and it actually brings me to a thought, for the keynote speaker earlier today for LRW, Jean Savage, the CEO of Trinity. If any of you were able to hear her session, one of the things that she talked about, it was a simple statement, but it really was thought-provoking. She said, the world is changing. Are you? Right?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, really, right? So we all have to flexible, whether, in 2020 has been a crazy year for change, but just in general, in so many different ways that we have to adapt and change, and you can't kind of be stuck in that old mindset. So, yeah, I thought
Sure.
that was,
Isn't there that saying of the only constant is change?
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things where you just kind of have to get on board and
Yep.
be okay with change. And
Yeah.
usually it's going to bring you to a better place. That's what I always think.
Yeah. And Regina, we'd like to hear your thoughts on this one as well before we go to our Q&A.
Sure. I would just say that, from my perspective, it's really helped me focus on what I wanted to accomplish with my life. So I've thought about, what's my personal vision for myself? What is it I want to do? And I've, definitely been flexible as it evolves, and it does evolve and change. But I would just say that I find myself being like just personally really accountable to what I want to accomplish. So kind of just that stepping up, accepting personal responsibility, kind of without being asked, looking for those opportunities, and just a way to really put myself out there and stay kind of committed to what I'm trying to accomplish. I like to state my personal ownership and what I'm trying to deliver, and what I want, how I want to show up. I look for opportunities to provide solutions and try to stay focused on what it is I want to, how I want to support and deliver to the business. And then, just really forming good communications and open communications with peers and colleagues. Just that personal responsibility is kind of the biggest thing. And I'm always thinking about how do I use my skills to, accomplish what I'm looking for in terms of vision and support my business. So yeah, those are my thoughts on that.
And I do like the mixture of being present, like, the self-awareness, helping yourself accountable, and then also the future looking, right? Thinking about your professional growth, your vision, et cetera. So I think inner leadership has a good mixture of being present and then looking forward as well. So with that, we'd like to open it up to questions. So you do have a question panel on the screen. I believe it's to your right. So if you want to submit any questions, we have a couple folks on the line that will help us to view those and surface those so we can answer them for you. So please go ahead and submit your questions. We're eager to hear and want to make sure that we're addressing where your interests are.
Hi, Sue, it's Patricia. We do have one question. What are some good specific questions you can ask your team to get the best feedback?
Okay, just throw it out to the panel here. Good questions to get feedback.
So I think, hi, it's Kim. I will start. One thing, because it is hard if you're asking, especially if there's people that are reporting to you, because that could be really uncomfortable. We talked about that already. So I think first, just kind of creating that safe space and opening up. What do you think went well, or what about my leadership style do you enjoy? And so you can get someone kind of starting, even though they may not know it, kind of that sandwich feedback where it's good feedback, maybe a little bit of constructive, and then end with some good. That usually opens up then a good segue to get to, where could I, be even better? Again, not, what did I do wrong? Really just kind of keep it in the positive.
I would agree. And I think just the open-ended questions too. And then, I think if you can depersonalize it, right, to make it, just about the behavior, the approach and things like that. So it's not about you personally. Sometimes it's about the approach that you took. How could the approach have been different and things like that. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And one of the things I would just say when like giving feedback, the structure, helping people understand a way to approach feedback is helpful. So something that I've learned is you can state the situation, how it made you feel, and then what can you do about it and how can you help them? So it's a matter of just starting from that place of caring, because it's really important to know I'm giving you feedback because I care about you. And it may not be the easiest thing to do. And here's how it made me feel. And then, what can we do and how can I help you? So you're kind of seeing it all the way through and maybe talking about how you actually not just the specific questions, but how do you actually do it so that it feels a lot more comfortable. And I know that when I walk it through in the steps, it's a lot more comfortable for me as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, which is about, it's this idea of creating a very safe space so that people know that, we're just having a conversation. But I have always thought about it too. And Regina, I think you're making a really good point, which is how can I help you? And how can we make this better together? And I think it's about creating that team mentality and not pointing fingers as you did this. I don't think this worked. It has to be more of a collaboration of, okay, this didn't work. Let's figure out what you and I need to do and what we can do together to make it better. And I do think that makes a big difference and makes people a little bit more open to feedback.
Mm-hmm. And I think Jen, I think that's a really good point too. And I think what this is all kind of tying into that all these things that we're doing to be good self-leaders, including getting this feedback, et cetera, these aren't things that happen overnight. Like I think someone had said earlier, it's a journey, right? You're on this path. So I just wouldn't want participants to think that, you're gonna, walk away and be immediately a strong self-leader. I think it's something that does take some time. Okay. Any other questions, Patricia, that has come in?
Yes, we have a couple. So the first one is, if you have families, I'd be interested in how you manage your career and upward path as a leader.
I can start there if that's okay. So I have 3 daughters. They are older, but I have been working full time and working through that career journey since they were born. And it's, to say it's easy would be crazy. I mean, it's a challenge, ups and downs, and, take each day. But one thing I did to try to create balance was to incorporate my kids as much as possible, because it felt, which got a little easier obviously as they got older, but the hard part was there's only so many hours in the day. And so if I could, incorporate them with, whether it was work or things that I'm passionate about or volunteer activities, I felt like I was, I don't want to say killing 2 birds with 1 stone, but, I was able to spend time with them. And that's part of raising them actually seeing me at work and learning from that and learning kind of how they're going to show up as a leader is really just such an important responsibility that I feel as a mother. And so involving them in cooking, we have to all eat, but then they're learning valuable skills and I'm getting help with cooking. So there's just so many little things, and teaching them to do laundry. It sounds like I have a little, that I've got this little, work team at home, but it does end up being that way. You can't be everything. You can't, it takes a village, and you are not a village of one Create as big a village as you possibly can, and it will make a huge difference.
Yeah, so I also have a family. I have a 7-year-old son and a 5-year-old daughter. So they're definitely not at the same level of helping Kim as your kids are. We're trying, especially
We can do laundry.
My daughter's starting to set the table, so that's good. No, but I will say that, so, I'm definitely earlier in my journey of working mom, but this is a hard part of it, for sure. I love, I love having a career and I love having a family. I would say that, yeah, it's not always easy every day. I think there are going to be times where you're much more focused on work and that you have that guilt in the back of your mind of, you're not with your kids as much. But what I think is the most important thing, and someone had told me this once, which is this whole idea of balance is it's hard to understand work-life balance, right? But what I think is it's really there are ebbs and flows, right? There are going to be times where you're really busy at work. And then there are times where you're less busy. And what you have to do is identify that and make sure that you focus elsewhere as you're kind of moving through this journey, because I really like the fact that my kids see that I'm working. As Kim, you mentioned, I think that it's good for both my son and daughter to see. But at the same time, it's also trying to make sure that you're there, and figuring out that balance, which sometimes is harder. And I do think the key thing is the help too, is exactly what Kim said, is your village. It has to be as big as possible. I completely agree with that. That is how, like, children are not raised by, 1 or 2 people, they're raised by a village, right? This whole idea, it's extended family, it's, extended help, whatever you need. I think all of that also helps to your kids develop better as well, because they have, they're exposed to a lot more people. But it's a challenge, and you kind of have to figure out when things are a little bit, when you have the more time to figure, stop and take the time, and don't, because what I have found is that I can get into these modes where, if I'm working a ton, it's like hard for me to stop and just, and that's where I think having children has allowed me to say, no, you have to stop. Because you're not going to be able to function if you don't stop for a little bit. So it's one of those things where, it's you do take it day by day. Some days are great, some days are much more challenging. I don't think I'd have it any other way. And what's interesting with the working mom thing is that it's constantly evolving, right? Like when Kim is telling me that her kids are doing all these things, I'm like, when is that going to happen to my kids? I do think that my son should be doing more, but it's one of those things where just when you think you've got it figured out, they change, and then you've got to kind of you've got to adjust again. But I think that's also it's all a good thing. Anyway, sorry, I could go on with this one for a while, so I'll let Regina speak.
Yep, thanks. All great tips, and I think it's also very individual. So what works for you? I would say the thing that I've learned, that whole, like, learn to ask people or share with people what you need as well, right? So I think we all have times when we definitely have to be on for work. And up until March, I would say that I was traveling as much as I was home. So it was quite a bit. And I think sharing with your team and your manager, so whether that's your direct reports, but also your peers, your staff that you work with, and your manager, where you are in your space, I think folks are much more willing than you would have thought about to be supportive of what you need, because there's plenty of time when we can all work. And I know that I have team people who work for me would say, gosh, you're sending emails at like 2 o'clock in the morning. Well, maybe I was in India when I sent that email, or maybe, it just happened to be that's the time that I could get stuff done. And so I think just sharing kind of where you are and kind of level setting on expectations, it's also super helpful, because people are willing to help you with what you need as well. I think it's a lot easier to just talk about what you need and your schedule, and and how your managers and your team can work with you to make that the most effective. Everybody's needs are very different. So
one thing that just came to mind for me when you were saying, sharing with others, I love that. To me, that's transparency. And I think as leaders, we can really kind of break that mold of being so secretive as to where we are. I know every organization, it doesn't always work, but to your point of, I was working at 2 a.m. Well, I might have been at my daughter's school, volunteering for an event so I can be with her from 12 to 2 during the day. Why not share that with people? I think your people that work with you, for you, whatever it might be, love to hear you're human. I mean, and that, we're not hiding it. I really feel like that's, hopefully that is more in the past than it is in the present.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Great comments, everybody. Good conversation. So thank you, everybody, for the Q&A. We have just a couple very quick slides that we're going to share here as we wrap up. I know we're right at time. And again, these slides will be posted on the LRW site. There are the 3 articles that I would encourage you to look through about self-leadership and inner leadership. And then I would encourage you to take advantage of any training that you have. I know at GATX we offer our employees LinkedIn Learning, and you might have other resources, but inner and self-leadership, there's all kinds of good material out there. So go ahead and seek that out, and you'll find all kinds of good information. We hope that you found some helpful information in our conversation today. So with that, I'm going to give it back to Patricia, who's going to cover just a couple of LRW slides before we sign off here.
All right, thank you, Sue. So again, thank you for hosting our panel today, and thank you, ladies, for giving us some inspiring, empowering, and encouraging words. And thanks everyone for attending. Please save the date and join us for next year's annual conference, hopefully in person in Indianapolis. We're going to hold this in conjunction with RSI, with the RSI show in September. And also, speaking of inner leadership, we do encourage you to join LRW and attend our annual membership meeting in September as well, right before the show. LRW is an amazing organization where you can practice your inner leadership skills and network with more great women. And last but not least, thank you to our corporate sponsors who helped us make this great session happen today. Thank you for joining. Have a wonderful rest of your day and see you again tomorrow. Bye.